Math with no math at Penn State University, the rise of an army of diversity officers, and stupid sex surveys in high school. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Duke. Thanks for joining us. And to all our new podcast subscribers, thank you very much for joining us today. We are a very unique program. There is nothing like us in American life right now. We are a podcast, we are a show dedicated to exposing what's going on American campuses, from preschool all the way through graduate school. We're going to give you the real skinny about how education is being co-opted by the left and what serious consequences face the nation if we don't get a handle on this. Please consider, if you haven't followed us on podcast, thedrdukeshow.com, drdukeshow.com, and you can join as well. And now I want to bring in the one and only Katie Petrick for the top stories of the week.
All right, for today, we're actually starting our top story at Penn State University, which doesn't seem to care about math at all anymore, because the freshmen and sophomores are getting a lot of social justice in their general educational math course. Basically, this course is being taught by Professor Mark Febreeze. It's called Finite Mathematics, and it's designed for non-science majors. The course is supposed to be an introduction to logic, sets, and probability, but the students seem to be getting a lot of Febreeze politics. Now, Campus Reform acquired a copy of the syllabus from last spring's course, and this professor is teaching this course in 3 sections this fall. On the syllabus, he talks about basically his love. It reads as his love of President Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. In a midterm, he actually gave a positive review of those Democratic presidents, saying, before asking students to analyze voting statistics in a section called Red Party, Politics, Shifts, and Cracks, he talked about male and female voters during the 2008 presidential election. Quote, "The emergence of the Tea Party played a central role in the 2008 U.S. presidential election. The victor was Barack Obama, who, like Bill Clinton, served as U.S. president for 8 years. The two men guided always by the strength of character and force of intellect of First Lady Michelle Obama and Hillary Clinton."
Yeah, so what I love about this, it's a finite math class for non-math majors. What I love about it, the only finite thing about this math class is the amount of math you're going to get. You're going to get everything else but math, right? It really is remarkable. And I've noticed this over the past 15, 20 years. It's really disconcerting that pretty much whatever your college background is, whatever your major is as a professor, whatever your area of study, you feel utterly qualified to weigh in on every political, every social issue of the day. It's like somehow getting a PhD in math now gives you carte blanche to be an expert on electioneering. It doesn't make any sense. But what this represents is something really wicked. It's this idea that, we've talked about a lot, that other people have talked about a lot. The primary purpose of your kid's college education ain't math, and it ain't science, and it ain't grammar, because I'm using the word ain't. The primary purpose of your kid's education now is this kind of social justice. And so you've got math classes being hijacked for pay-ins to Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. The idea that those two guys, Clinton and Obama, are both guided by the powerful insights of the women in their lives. Do you really think Bill Clinton was sitting around the Oval Office with Monica hunched under the desk while Hillary was lecturing him about public policy? I just don't see it. And the fact that I'm more willing to believe that Barack Obama was kind of like a big puppet, right, for Michelle. That makes a little bit more sense to them when you look at the two personalities. But again, what qualifies a math professor to talk about these things? And what makes him think he can co-opt a general education math program, kids, non-major math kids who really do need some math to be able to function? Why does he feel he's qualified to override that math instruction for his own political vanity? But that's what's happening in every department on every college campus today.
If you look at Mark Febreeze's website, I don't know if it was after the story aired or if it was before, but if you look at it, he has links to his syllabus, he has links to the tests and questions and answers, and if you click on every link down the left side, they're all now broken links. So I don't know if he got wind of this or something.
I'll tell you what that picture is. That's Jason before the accident. Right? Picture that dude 25 years later with a hockey mask on.
There he is.
Right? And now he's teaching your kids non-math in math class. Way to go.
Yeah. Well, it suits that picture because he does have other questions on his different tests about fracking and other environmental efforts. So it makes sense. Penn State did respond. They said that they're looking into the course, but they stressed the professor's right to academic freedom.
So the professor has an academic right to teach not math to math kids. All right. I'm all for it. Just remember that, universities. Remember that when I start teaching Shakespeare from the lens of Reagan economics, you got to let me alone because I may not be qualified, but Penn State has now weighed in that professors have the right to teach anything but the subject they're trained to teach.
All right, so we're going to go to our K12 education stories because we have a couple of them coming out this week. Portland Social Justice Teaching Guide is glorifying Islam, communism, Black Panthers, and Iran. So the Portland educators received this new teaching guide. It's called Planning to Change the World, a plan book for social justice teachers 2018-2019. It comes with weekly planning pages packed with important social justice birthdays and historical events. And it's actually the 11th rendition of this planning guide, and now all the Portland school teachers, which there are more than 3,500, teaching more than 49,000 students, they got this planning guide, and it was developed by none other than Howard Zinn, who he inspired this rethinking schools, and he framed it obviously from a far left political perspective. Howard Zinn says that this is an imaginative and innovative idea in the field of education. It's something that teachers all over the country who have special consciences will find useful because it will give them an opportunity and a framework for putting into practice what they believe. I hope it will be widely adopted. So a lot of these pages, they give credence to Che Guevara, Islam, the Black Panther Party. They celebrate the founding of North Korea and Iran. They urge students to support gun control and abortion. And of course, they minimize or completely eliminate Christian holidays.
Why is it that my kids have to listen to your teacher's worldview? Howard Zinn, this is the guy who perhaps for the first time in American, most prominently in American history, he decided he was going to create a history textbook that wasn't really history. It was American history viewed through a socialist lens. I mean, this was really cutting edge back in the 1970s, and he got it in all American schools. Rather than teaching our kids about the world, about the realities of life, about math in math class and history in history class, Howard Zinn decided he was going to view all of these subjects in American public schools through the lens of socialism. Go back to the cover of that pamphlet that's being passed out. It tells you everything you need to know. Planning to change the world. Is that why you send your kids to school, Mom and Dad, so that your professors, your teachers, can train them to change the world along Marxist lines? And what you said is exactly right. Christian holidays are verboten. We're not talking about the traditional history of America anymore. Constitution is for suckers. Don't talk about that. We're celebrating Che Guevara. We're celebrating the Castro brothers. We're celebrating the Republic, the Islamic Republic of Iran, for God's sake, and telling your teachers if they have a conscience. Are you assuming for 1 second that the only teachers that have consciences are your liberal, progressive, social justice teachers? To actively refute this and teach your kids about the Constitution or Columbus's voyage or to teach them about the Founding Fathers is somehow against conscience? This is what we have to fight about. All of your kids' classroom education is being filtered through a radically leftist, socialist, progressive lens. And when they start talking about conscience, they mean the conscientious effort on the part of Portland's teachers to indoctrinate your kids. They're not even pretending anymore that they're not doing it.
Yeah, and with 3,500 teachers getting this planning guide, and that's affecting 49,000 students, that's technically just one giant school district. That's just one city all across the U.S. And they had the actual hard copies of this planning guide sold out, so now you have to get the PDF version, and I hope they donate all the proceeds to everyone else since they don't really care.
I mean, look at the cartoon you've thrown up there. It doesn't take much to refrain from saying boys and girls, except a abandonment of truth. It doesn't take much to refrain from saying boys and girls, unless you're going to completely disavow biology. It's propaganda. It is the entry into your schools of propaganda. It is high-level propaganda. It is district-wide. It is Portland schools-wide propaganda that they have put into your schools. They are encouraged, the administration is encouraging your teachers to use this. Are you surprised that your kids are going to turn out as good little confused transgender social justice warrior Antifa participants? Because that's what you're going to get.
And we need more parents like the ones at the Chino Valley Board of Education in California who showed up to demand that schools stop basically pushing their agendas on their kids. So at the Chino Valley Board of Education meeting, several hundred parents turned out to demand greater control over their children's sex education curriculums. They called for notification and opt-out option when their kids are presented with this sexually explicit content in public schools. Now, there was a video that was posted on Facebook showing the parents holding these signs out down the hallway. And some of the signs said, let parents decide and support parents' right to decide, as if that's a controversial thing that we actually need to put on a sign. But we do, because that's where we are in 2018.
Well, there's a hallmark of American education in 2018 that parents have to go either hat in hand or in protest to get the schools to recognize their own rights to be mothers and fathers. Right? The fact that you're going either angry or contrite to beg or demand that public schools leave sensitive sexual issues to mom and dad tells you how broken our government schools are. The fact that you have to ask them for opt-outs. You should be 10 years ago, you were notified before the public schools started talking about sex, and no kid in second and third grade was learning anything about sex. Now the whole system has been transformed in large part to clown show academics like Howard Zinn, and you're going hat in hand back to the university. You go ahead and pound those desks at the school board meetings. You go ahead and supplicate your principal to stop doing it. They're not going to listen to you. And when you find out, I'm glad they're doing it. I'm glad Chino's turning out. A California city that's actually protesting the radical liberal sexualization of children, good for them. But as soon as you realize, Chino, that they are not going to do anything, time to pull your kids out, all right? Because if they're not going to listen to you, you got two options. Roll over, or you pull your kids out. You want to send a real message to Chino schools? Pull your kids out and parent them yourself. Parenting, part of parenting is educating. A huge part, perhaps the biggest part of parenting is education. Certainly, you can take back most of the responsibilities to educate your own kids or find alternative ways to do it. If you don't do it, and you roll over and you allow, after the protest dies down and you go back home and they promise you things, well, we'll take this under consideration. We're going to run this through the superintendent's office, and you hear nothing back from them, what are you going to do then, Chino? Hopefully you will take the next step and pull your kids out.
Yeah, Tony Perkins, who's the president of the Family Research Council, said as much in this report. He said, what's at stake is the fundamental right of parents to direct the upbringing of their children, not the state. When it comes to sensitive, controversial, or even inappropriate subject matter, parents, not bureaucrats, teachers, or any other government official, should have the final say in what their children will be exposed to.
Not just the final say, but the first say. I mean, the problem is we're taking this position all across the country that the final say belongs to mom and dad. And by the time the final say is said, there's already been a lot of other things said that shouldn't have been said. How about we have first priority as parents? We have the first say in how our kids learn. We decide what levels they're going to get sexuality, if they get it at all. We decide whether they're going to get simple biology or all of this coercive indoctrination. If we had the first say, because we're the ones who's paying for the schools, if we had first say, the schools would run a lot better than if we waited until we had our final say.
Yeah, and just a little side note, I was actually really proud to see that there were parents at a school board meeting, because as someone who had to cover school board meetings for the newspaper, oftentimes I was the only person, the one and only person in the room when they were having the school board meetings. So if the parents actually show up and voice their opinions, things can change.
Well, we need a lot more of them, and they got to get a lot louder, and they've got to start demanding at the outset of schooling, not when something goes wrong. They've got to start deciding early in every school year, from the moment they send their kids to kindergarten, with the beginning of each new middle, elementary, and high school, moms and dads have to decide that proactively they're going to be on top of what their kids are being taught, proactive rather than reactive when something really stupid finally comes to light.
Okay. Going on to the college campus now, we're going to go to Ohio State, which it was revealed that they have employed 88 diversity-related staffers, and it's at a cost of $7.3 million annually. That makes your blood boil, I'm sure. So basically, the Buckeye State taxpayers are forking over $5.38 million in salaries and $1.89 million in fringe benefits. And economics professor Mark Perry said that this basically equates to giving full scholarships for tuition and fees to 750 in-state students. So either you could get 750 students getting their education paid for, or these 88 diversity staffers. Yeah,
those stats, and throw the numbers back up again, are staggering. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier in the week about this, and the University of Michigan is even worse. I mean, when all the big state universities are doing this, you're paying, at Ohio State University, which is a big university, 50,000 plus students, 88 diversity-related staffers that you're paying over $7 million. It is astounding. And what you're doing is you are, at major universities all across the country, and the universities I've taught at, we're pulling back on faculty. People are retiring from their professorial jobs, and we're not replacing. For every two retirees, we might be able to fill one academic line. We are not focusing our resources and our attitudes on who's teaching our kids' class, like this clown in Pennsylvania at Penn State University. Big Ten's all over the place with bad academic news, right? You got this professor at Penn State who's not even teaching math in math class anymore. And you have a situation here at Ohio State where, what do you need all those the diversity officers for? And that's not including the diversity staff. Those are the employees. What about all the secretaries? What about all the kids who are in internship positions? What you're doing here is you're creating an entire deep educational state. I'm coining this term, deep state education. You have a huge deep state education apparatus that is composed of social justice warriors and diversity officers. These people are the ones quietly pulling the strings. It's not college presidents, it's not deans, it's not faculty. Schools are being co-opted, universities are being co-opted by this deep state organization of diversity officers who for every one they hire, they got to hire 4 more. Oh, we don't have a diversity officer for black gay wheelchair victims. We don't have a diversity officer for transgender Vietnam vets. And so you have to have a new person and a new staff brought on board. Heaven forbid you're not intersectional. Understand this. It's not, again, the state legislature. It's not, again, moms and dads who pay the tuition. It's this deep state brand of diversity officer, social justice warrior, who's infiltrated every aspect of your kid's education and are driving up the cost of tuition with all of the added perks and benefits and bonuses and displays and sideshows that they put on every year at the expense of your kids' tuition dollars to reinforce the idea that your kids aren't progressive enough. This is what really has to be fought. Let's get back to teaching college. Let's get back to having kids in classrooms learning stuff. We're a long way away from that, and we've created, again, an entire bureaucracy who solely exists to feed parasitically off of what universities are supposed to be for their own very insular political aims.
Yeah, if you're looking to get a job, I mean, this is one of those jobs, being a diversicrat, that you didn't have 20 years ago. And now, at least at Ohio State, the top person is making $265,000, and the next 8 are all making over $100,000.
Right, you think about that.
So there's a job for you if you want one.
There's no there there.
There's no there there.
You're a diversity officer, which means you don't know anything except social justice theory. It's not like you're an English professor who also on the side does social justice, where you at least have a degree in English, or you're a math professor who's really good at math, but also is interested in social justice concerns. You're actually hiring these bureaucrats, these technocrats, these diversicrats, as you call them. You're hiring them for no other reason than to keep the outrage mill ginning. What happens if one of these diversity officers says, you know what, we've got 22% African-American participation when African-Americans are only 12% of the population. I'm going to quit my job now. We don't need me anymore. No! You could have 50% African-American enrollment at a university, even though they represent 12% of the population. And that professor, that university diversity officer, is going to have to say, not enough. We haven't done enough. We may have 50% enrollment of African-Americans, but they're not treated equally. They don't have their own dorms. So in other words, the purpose of these diversity officers is to preserve their own jobs by finding offense in everything. And that, my friends, is why they invited microaggressions. There aren't anywhere near enough serious racial events on our colleges. There's not nearly enough actual prejudice on our colleges to warrant 88 diversity officers. So what do? You invent microaggressions. We need 88 diversity officers because we need somebody to police the bathrooms, to make sure that transgender people are allowed to go in the bathroom of their choice and no one's harassing. You got to have all of that stuff now. It is never-ending, and it is self-replicating, and it is endlessly expensive. And guess who that cost is passed down to? The kids.
Okay. Well, the thing is, when you do have different things happening on campus, now that we have all these 88, you can, I guess, report them to the bias team. At least that's what you can do at Grand Valley State University in Michigan, which is encouraging their students to basically report feelings of being belittled, disrespected to the bias team. So according to the school website, Grand Valley State University strives to create an inclusive and equitable campus community where people are treated with dignity and respect. If anyone in the Grand Valley community feels belittled, disrespected, or isolated based on their identity, there is a mechanism to report the incident. And these bias incidents are supposed to be reported to the team against bias.
Yeah, throw that picture up again. This is remarkable, the story here from the College Fix, fantastic website, but this is remarkable that with all the problems on college campuses, we keep hearing from university administrators that everybody's getting raped on college campuses. We keep hearing that African-American minority students are so threatened on college campuses that they're forced into Antifa to burn things down. We keep hearing about how a college education is slipping in terms of its value, its marketability, and yet what are they devoting all of this time to? If somebody hurts your feelings, call us. If you feel disrespected by anyone at all, call us. We're going to take university resources and time to investigate your hurt feelings. I mean, what are you going to get when you send out that kind of an advertise? Hurt feelings all over, right? You advertise for that, you're going to find hurt feelings everywhere. Although, with one exception, I am pretty damn well sure that if a conservative kid at Penn State, for instance, was to go to their diversity officer and complain that their math class is being run as a social justice political science course, I'm pretty sure those hurt feelings aren't going to matter all that much because, you know, academic freedom and all that.
Well, when I read this story, I couldn't help but think back to 1984 with George Orwell, where the children are supposed to rat on their parents or anyone doing anything. This is exactly what they're telling these students to do. Just rat on anyone who even looks like they may want to belittle someone else.
That's right.
Yeah. So the website does say that in the winter of 2018, there were 31 reported bias incidents, and most of them dealt with race, gender, and sexual orientation.
You think?
Yeah.
And why is that? Because those are the only people allowed to be offended.
Exactly.
Right? And you could be, if you're being offended from the perspective of race, class, or gender or sexuality, it doesn't matter if you have a legitimate complaint or not. We want to hear from you, right? Because think about it. The more fake complaints lodged, the more fake investigations launched, the more you need fake diversity officers to pay them a lot more money to gin up more fake claims, right? It's a vicious cycle here.
Yeah, but guess what? We have found that the diversity officials we've been speaking about, they're taking home their big salaries, as we found out, and guess what? They're not actually helping diversify anything. Shock.
So what you're telling me, when you apply economics and math to the value of diversity officers, you find no movement. Tell that story. Tell our audience that story.
The National Bureau of Economic Research. National Bureau of Economic Research. They have a working paper out, so they still need to have it peer reviewed. But they found that no significant statistical evidence of chief diversity officers, we're going to call them CDOs, do anything to improve pre-existing growth in the academic hiring of underrepresented racial and ethnic groups on campus. Basically, 4 researchers from Baylor University, they looked at data from 2001 through 2016, so we're looking at a 15-year period, to test whether executive-level administrative positions significantly altered faculty diversity hiring practices beyond any normal growth. And the paper states, quote, "Importantly, we are unable to find evidence that pre-existing patterns in diversity hiring are altered by the hiring of an executive-level diversity officer at the faculty or administration hiring level using a number of alternative specifications."
You listening to her? We've got science, research. I love the word science, research, investigation, conclusion. We can't find any evidence that all of these highly paid diversity officers are actually increasing diversity enrollment. And in fact, in certain factors, they are, wait for it.
Here's the irony.
Katie.
The study found that in the time period surveyed, the proportions for underrepresented groups has been consistently higher in universities without a chief diversity officer than with a CDO present. Moreover, the proportion of diverse tenured faculty hired is 5.61% lower with an active CDO in place.
Are you listening to that? The best way to guarantee more diversity on a college campus is to get rid of diversity officers. The best way to guarantee more education on a college campus is to get rid of social justice warriors, right?
Can you say it one more time? I just want to make sure.
I'm not going to repeat that. Mike, will you get mad if I drop? I'm going to drop the mic. It's kind of a big mic. No, all right, I won't drop the mic. But you understand at home that that's a mic drop moment.
That is a mic drop moment. And just so you know, really, if this diversity stuff got started in the early 2000s, and by 2016, about 65% of higher education institutions had some sort of this whole CDO. So if you were at one of those 35 that didn't,
you are really at the point at colleges and universities, if for some reason you had no math program, they would muddle on. If you, for some reason, got rid of the English department and no one was teaching writing on a college campus, not to say that English departments actually teach writing anymore, but you got rid of the English department, they would find a way to muddle on. There's no possible way a major or minor university in this country could get away with not having a diversity team. Could get away with not having a diversity bureaucracy. If you don't have that, you are not a university, and it shows you again what the values of our schools are.
Well, for the final story in this segment, we're going to talk about a university that is hosting a separate orientation for black freshmen. And at George Mason University in Virginia this year, and in other years actually, they have promoted the Black Freshman Orientation, and it's being hosted by the Black Student Alliance. Now, it's not uncommon that on college campuses, all freshmen go to orientation. It's a common thing, because they want to get the students acclimated and make them feel included on campus. Well, the Black Freshman Orientation, called Welcome to, with the number 2, Mason 2018, had the purpose of helping new students feel welcome at the university. The website said that their event is dedicated for the incoming freshmen who identify as black or are supporters of black people. The Black Freshman Orientation will offer ways to be involved at Mason, not only with the black organizations, but also Mason as a whole. This event allows incoming students for an outlook on how the black community at Mason is like.
So we're going to take the white kids and separate them, and to welcome them to the campus simply on the basis of their race. We're going to encourage those white kids how to get involved with university activities, particularly white activities. We're going to give them increased access and acceptability and pride in their race. We're going to construct whiteness in a positive way for them. Never in a frickin' million years would that happen. Again, you got to go back to the idea that you're going to orientate black students without any other white students around. And then what you're going to do simply by that act, by giving them their own orientation, you are going to, from the moment they set foot on campus, inculcate in them the idea that they are different, that they have nothing in common, that they must see the world differently and be treated differently, that the people who aren't in their orientation, white people, aren't there because they don't want to be there. The implication is that these white kids, you don't need to be around them, you shouldn't have to be exposed to them, and they wouldn't come anyway because they're racist. What you're doing here with these separate orientations is guaranteeing future miscommunication, suspicion, and ignorance about each other's races. That's what you're doing. Well, that's good, because guess what that's going to trigger? More bias response incidents because your feelings are hurt, hiring more diversity officers to deal with the investigations, and more big salaries for completely clueless diversity administrators who come up with segregated graduations, segregated dances, segregated orientations. I thought, when did the word segregate become a positive verb for progressives?
Yeah.
Is that another mic drop?
You dropped that mic and you're fired, I think.
I want to know when progressives decided that the verb to segregate became a positive thing, because that's exactly what they've decided now.
This week's final story, we're going back to Ohio, this time to a high school in Hilliard Bradley High School with Sarah Gillum, who's a 35-year-old English teacher who's just been suspended because of this morality test that she made her students take. Now, she's been put on paid administrative leave because parents found out that she gave the Moral Foundations test. It's a 36-question test from idrlabs.com. Now, basically what it is, you have 36 questions, and it's based on morality. So you have, on like a Likert scale, choose whether the statement that they put out is not okay all the way to okay. And I'm just going to give you a couple of the questions that they found to be not acceptable, and I wonder why. Here's a question. A man orders a custom-built sex doll designed to look just like his niece. Is that not okay? All the way to okay. Using both a condom and the pill, a brother and a sister decide that they want to sleep with each other just once to see what it would be like. And then we have Sarah's dog, who has 4 puppies. She can only find a home for 2 of them, so she kills the other 2 with a stone to the head.
So, incest and caninocide.
Yes.
What seem to be the orders. How old are these kids that are getting this survey?
High school, it's English. English.
We have said a lot about this with Common Core, how Common Core and the related federalizing of education, the social justice takeover of education, was going to do just this. Using your kids' class time in English class, where they could be reading Shakespeare or Homer or Aeschylus, and instead substituting. So why let kids derive their morality from the great thinkers of Western culture? Why expose kids to the great works of Western culture, these towering works of intellect with great moral capacity, when you can give them a stupid quiz made up by Cosmo magazine pushing incest? The idea that you're asking high school kids to sort of morally rank an uncle who creates a sex doll to look just like his niece. I mean, how many ways can you use an assignment like that to mainstream all sorts of attitudes towards sexuality? Go back to our first story, right? Mainstream all kinds of sexuality that really belongs to the parents to decide. And so, of the 3 of those particular stories, which one do you find the most egregious?
I looked at all 36 questions,
yeah.
So I can't even pick down to just one. I actually have a different one that I enjoyed.
Which one?
The one that stuck out to me is talking, and they're all named Sarah for some reason. It's always Sarah. Sarah gets drunk in a bar and makes out with 2 strangers at once. That one just stood out to me because why would a high school kids be questioning why Sarah's getting drunk in a bar and making out with 2 people? I mean, out of these 36 questions, I didn't count them, but it felt like at least a third of them were somehow related directly to sex, if not more.
And incest.
In incest. Well, yeah,
again,
in sex education class, the students are asked to inflate a condom with their mouth.
That's right.
But I did actually take the test, And I purposely answered as close to a social justice like as possible. And at the end of the test, you actually are given your strongest moral foundation, and mine was care. So I care.
And after taking the 36 questions and answering them, you were designated. Notice how they can't even use numbers. They can't even rank you on some kind of a sliding scale, like moral to immoral or good person, bad person. Yours is just care. Yeah, check it out. Look what you've got. Here are your scores: care, fairness, purity, liberty, authority, and loyalty. Isn't that nice? I mean, notice how.
And that I just clicked right through, so I kept everything exactly in the middle.
Right.
That's how your score would translate. But mine, when I shifted the answers to what it would be, care was number one for me.
Care? What a way to rate. What's the difference between caring and how do you define purity?
Based on their standards, I mean, half this test.
In other words, how much class time? 36 questions, letting kids work through them, the inevitable stupid discussions about this. Right? Well, was it a niece on the mother's side or the father's side? That the stupidity that must have followed, that would have taken at least an entire English period. One whole English class period that you wasted on this stuff. But, interestingly enough, in the blowback, the teacher has stepped away from school, right? She has resigned her position.
And it would make sense that she walked away. She's been teaching with the district since 2007. This isn't her first rodeo. So, number one, how many other morality tests has she given over the period of these past years? And basically the district, when they did find out, to the district's credit, they said they never approved the test. They apologized to the parents and the students, and Gillum was ordered to stay off campus until further notice.
I think she's gone now. And what's interesting to me about this is, I'm sure this has happened before, but notice what the schools are trying to do. They're trying to create morality without context. A 1 or 2 sentence observation. What if you had an uncle who created a sex doll that looks like his own niece? That's not really a complex moral situation. It doesn't arise naturalistically out of some human interaction. It's just a statement. We used to read books again. You used to read a play like Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare, which brought up all sorts of issues of treating how you treat people, about people of different backgrounds. Reading books organically, moral issues, complicated, rose out of those texts, and then you could have really adult discussions about them in meaningful ways. This is, again, education by notes, right? Spark notes. This is Spark Notes' way of teaching morality. Let's not really present a complicated moral issue that will allow us to see all sorts of different complicated perspectives. Let's just throw a stupid statement at you and have you make a quick flash judgment on it without any context. This is why the humanities are being destroyed, and this is why our kids are so morally in limbo. Our millennials and younger, they have no real sense of moral foundations because you're giving them nothing foundational. You're just giving them these kind of Cosmo quiz versions of right and wrong and true and false.
That's true. Well, if you liked what you saw on today's show, make sure you listen again on the podcast version. You can subscribe on all the different platforms at drdukeshow.com.
And that does it for us this week on the Dr. Duke Show for Freedom Project. I am Dr. Duke. She's Katie, and we will see you next time.